Hi guys, welcome back in Inkscape tutorial, and today we will talk about select tool, so one of the basics tool in Inkscape. So let's jump into editor. Let's prepare some objects. Maybe change some color. We can use duplicate option or Ctrl+D, which are doing exactly the same, and maybe one circle, for example red. Okay, now we can start. So what is select tool and how to use it? On the left side we see the basic tools, and first of this with the cursor icon is select tool, actually the select and transform object, with hotkey S on your keyboard. And select tool basically allows you to select elements and manipulate them on the editor. So some basics. How to select element. Basically you can click on any element and it will select that one, or you can select area which contain element and it also will be selected. It works similar way when we select more elements. By clicking to select more elements you need to press Shift and it will select more than one. Okay, how to move? By pressing left key on your mouse you can move freely in your editor where you want to place element. But when you want to precisely move left and right without, for example, jumping up and down, you can press Ctrl on your keyboard and it will allow you to precisely move left or right. Same situation for vertical moving. Okay, so next thing is select options. So when you click once on any element, you will get the scaling handlers. So these black arrows which allow you to resize the element. Extension for that is, again, when you click Ctrl, it will keep, for example, the ratio while scaling. When you move, for example, horizontally, it will lock the left edge and it will allow you to keep the left edge when it was and just scale right side. Okay, so again, when you click once you see the scaling handlers. When you click again it will change into rotation handlers which allow you to rotate element. Here helpful is the bottom information bar. So when you start rotating element you will see exact the angle of the rotation. Here another option is pressing Ctrl, which allow you to precisely rotate of the kind of snips, and it actually rotate the element around 50 degrees. Next thing is selecting element, but you want to, for example, keep that selection at once. So when you unselect, you see that after selecting again, you need to again select that 2 element. When you play with more than, for example, 2, imagine 100, solution for that is grouping. So in context menu, select the group option. It will group more than one element into one, and even if you unselect and back to this element, it will treat as group of elements. To unselect or ungroup that element, you can use ungroup option, or you can double click on any element and it will automatically ungroup that element. Okay, so that's basics of the manipulation. Let's jump into context option. So on the left side, when you select any tool, you see that here is bar with context options. So in our case, in select tool, you see a lot of different options which are connected with selection. So first option is select all objects, which is nothing special. It will just select all objects which we can use to move a bit all elements, or just to make sure we are selecting all elements even if some of element is, for example, somewhere. Okay, next thing is similar. It selects all objects in all visible and unlocked layers. So if any of elements will be invisible or on the locked layer, it will not select that element. So let's create a layer. For example, on the layer 2 we will create another object. We see that this object is on the layer 2 and all other is on the first layer. Okay, so when we lock the second layer with this red one, if we select all elements, we see that selection is only on our unlocked layer. So when you work with layers, it could be very helpful. Next thing is deselect and any selected objects or nodes. So just deselect any of the elements. So nothing special. Basically, to unselect element, the easiest way is to click on the empty area or just use the escape button. Okay, so this is our group. We can ungroup this, and now we have two separate objects. So next options are rotation of the 90 degrees, so clockwise or anti-clockwise, so nothing special. Or we can flip selected objects horizontally or vertically. In that case it do nothing, but actually it flips our element. We don't see that because our reference point is at the center, so we don't see any difference. When we click on our element once again, it will show up the cross icon, and now we can select that icon and place the reference point where we want. And now it's, when you use the reflection, so the flip tool, it will flip referencing to that point. So that's probably most important element in that options. Next thing are about moving up and down selected element. So lower selection to the bottom or rising it up. So for example, that element is at the top. When we want to push that to the bottom, just select the first option or the end button or your keyboard. Or you can use same function but with one step. So for example, this yellow will rise to the front. I see the problem, we have this element on the other layer. So in that case, when we push to the front, it will be at the top. When we push to the down, it will be at the end. But when we use the step, it will precisely place our selected element where we want. Okay, so next thing is the position. So X and Y, exact position. We can increase and move element on the X or Y as we want, or we can precisely place element on our working area. It could be helpful when we want to, for example, stick that element exact on the left edge. For example, like this. Manually it's hard to do, but when we see that when we place that element here and it's width 400, it means that it should start at 600. So let's move it to 600 and we zoom in, it's exactly in our place where we want to be. So that could be helpful by manipulating, moving up and down very precisely, or placing elements. Here important thing is locker. So when we use that lock, it will change the both and high by the same proportion. So what it means? Now when we resize elements, we can change the width and height of the element, but when we use that locker and by pressed its option is on, it will automatically keep the proportion of the scaling element. Same approach we will see when we press Ctrl, without that option of course, Ctrl, and using scaling. It's actually doing the same but using the hotkey. For that values, we can of course change the unit from pixels to point, inches, or whatever we want, and it will automatically be calculated in our fields. Okay, so next thing is when scaling objects, scale the stroke width by the same proportion. So when we are scaling that element, we have some stroke here. When we go to stroke style, we see that, let's make them 4, maybe 20 pixels. And when we are scaling, we see that it keeps the 20 pixels as we set it. But when we push that button, it will automatically recalculate the proportion of the element and the stroke, which is actually element of the object. So sometimes it's helpful when we want to naturally scale the element to keep the proportions of the stroke. Next thing is scaling rectangles and scale the graduation actually of the rounded corners. So here we have rounded corner. We can see that in our option we can change it. So when we scale it, it will keep actually the range of the radius, and after scaling down it will almost be the circle. So when we turn on this option, it will proportionally resize the range of the radius and the actually size of the rounded corner to keep the same effect no matter of the size of the element. Okay, so next thing is move gradients, fill or stroke along the objects. So it could be helpful when we want to use any gradient, for example like this, and when we move a bit that element, we see that on the left there is green and on the right is transparency, so actually our background, which is white. So we know that when we move left we will get the full fill of the green, and somewhere here we get actual gradient as we want. So when we click on that, we will keep the gradient with the object. We can change that, and now we can keep, we can rotate, we can manipulate that element, and nothing will change with our gradient. Similar situation is for the last option, which is for the patterns. So when we have any pattern inside our element, when we move element, it will allow us to see, and it works actually as a clipping mask. So when we move a bit down, we know that here is another stripe, so we can place as we want our element, and to lock that pattern inside we just press that element, and now when we move it will keep, and for example we get some nice Easter egg. Okay, so that's all of the options from the context menu. We have also some options in edit connected with selecting. So here are options like select all in all layers, select same. This could be helpful when you want to select similar elements with same stroke color, fill color or other options. And invert selection. Invert selection will just invert the selection of our element. So when we select that option, it will select any other objects except that we want that we select at the beginning. So it's worth to know about invert selection, and exclamation mark is the short key for that option. And the last deselection is just escape, which I mentioned before. So actually there are a lot of different options of the basic select tool. So please spend some time and play with this basic tool and get familiar with any options. For sure it will help you in future. So that's all in this tutorial, and thanks for watching.